friends, my name is Annie and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the arts of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. Today we are going to continue our series into the history of superhero costumes. In our last video in this series, which was a couple weeks back, and I will link that in the description below and up here if I can remember so that you can go check it out yourself, we talked about the birth of the superhero genre and the era that has come to be known as the Golden Age of comics. Although superhero type characters did exist prior to the 20th century, the superhero genre as we know it today really solidified in the 1930s and the 1940s. And its huge surge in popularity around the time of World War II is what brought it to global audiences. For this week's episode, we move into the late 40s and 50s, in a time where we almost lost the whole genre of superhero stories entirely. This dip in popularity after the Golden Era is sometimes referred to as the Atomic Age of comics. Like last time, I will set the stage with a bit of historical context and then explore the intersection of fashion and crime fighting, and then we will apply those concepts to my own original superheroes as a kind of experiment/application. We'll dress up Cannonball Cooper and Redemption from the Fearless Nine and redesign their costumes as if they were present during the Atomic Age of comics. Sounds like a blast! Sorry, there may be more than a few explodey atomic type jokes through this video. Just roll with me. So, let's get started. The 50s tend to be a popular choice for a trip back in time, which, between poodle skirts, soda pop, and awesome cars, is no surprise. But the shine and shimmer of the 50s is not as awesome as it seems, especially if you're a fan of superheroes. At the end of the 1940s and after the conclusion of World War II, the United States declared themselves to be the mighty and heroic global superpower, or basically the Captain America of the world. With the fighting over and the infamous Adolf Hitler 6 feet under, victorious soldiers flooded home and citizens were anxious to get back to a sense of normalcy and rest on their laurels. For comic book superheroes, whose easiest and most popular villains included Nazis of any variety, this shift in the atmosphere prompted a need for redirection. Although Americans considered themselves to be strong and happy and virtuous, the repercussions of a world torn apart by war soon began to rumble through the culture. Soldiers traumatized by battle had to figure out a way to transition back to civilian life, despite the horrors they had seen. Women and minorities who had been empowered in the power vacuum left by military recruits were being pressured back into traditional roles. Global politics and national relations had to grapple with a new world order, framed by the power to completely obliterate the human race, with the namesake of this era, the atomic bomb. Despite the success of the post-war economy and the shiny new future promised to the nuclear family, the American dream was more shallow than people cared to realize. Soon the United States found out that being king of the hill only means that everyone else becomes a competitor, and therefore a threat. Guilt, trauma, and paranoia soon found its way into the very foundations of American culture, and therefore into the comic book world as well. With the combination of these dark cultural undertones, a double dose of denial and escapism, and an audience that had already consumed its fill of cartoonish anti-Nazi crusades, the comic book world was desperate to hold onto its audience. One of the ways they did so was to expand their content into other genres. The most popular of these were horror, crime, westerns, and romance. These were often written and printed in huge numbers with wide varieties of short-running stories in an attempt to keep the audience's attention. The content soon came to be known as pulp fiction, which was just as shallow as the American dream. Only a handful of superhero stories actually continued during this time period between the 40s and the 50s. They included Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman, and very few others. Even superheroes with their own serial headlines were cut for gruesome unsupernatural crime and cowboys riding off into the sunset. Soon there were so few superheroes around, one might wonder whether the genre was no more than a passing fad that would disappear almost as soon as it had burst onto the scene. The superhero stories that remained during this time shifted gears to include other things that Americans were hearing about on the news, hoping to remain relevant. There were plot points based on aliens, nuclear science, and a new type of generic villain: communists. When America split ties with their former World War II allies, tension between the West and Russia grew exponentially and seeped into popular culture. The only thing that seemed to keep the Cold War from sparking an explosion was the logical conundrum of mutually assured destruction. The idea that if either side fired first, they would doom themselves. Even with the obvious cultural dampener this put on the industry, the comic book companies did plenty to nuke their own development. Nuke. DC Comics sued Fawcett Comics over the character Captain Marvel, which DC claimed was a ripoff of their own Superman. They won that legal battle, and with ownership of the rights secured, they essentially eradicated that character from existence. In spite of his popularity after punching Adolf Hitler in the face, Captain America got cut out of his own series and was replaced by much more mundane stories. And then, get this, when a female version of Cap appeared in the back pages of a different comic and became popular with teenage girls, Marvel Comics, known at the time as Timely Comics, misunderstood the draw of this character and turned the budding Miss America story into an uninspired teen drama about dances and dating. They could have finally gotten hold of the teen girl superhero market, but instead they translated that into a cheap marketing ploy based on what little girls should want to read about. Sound familiar, ladies? With all of this greed, paranoia, and desperation, it's no wonder superheroes almost lost their footing in popular culture during the atomic age of comics. Whew! What a decade! And that's on top of widespread misogyny, racism, and a haze of cigarette smoke. Almost makes you want to crawl back into your bunker and forget about 2020, doesn't it? Oh. Anyway, let's move on to the superhero costume trends that were featured in comic books during the Atomic Age. I'll put our two test subjects up on the screen, with Cannonball Cooper as our male experiment and Redemption as our female. As you can see, their modern costumes would be pretty out of place for the 50s. I'll admit, with so many of the superhero stories dropping off the map at this time, it was a bit of a challenge to find some good guidelines for this redesign. But after some deep dive reading, I was able to suss out some key concepts. For male superheroes, not a lot has changed between the Golden Age and the Atomic Age, except what was consistent with the culture. After a decade or two of refinement, a lot of the costumes for male superheroes looked more tailored back. There were smoother lines, more streamlined designs, and a bit more reproducible looks. As you can see here, I just took our Golden Age Cannonball Cooper and adjusted some of his features. The hair isn't quite so big, the boots are tighter and simpler, the cape is a bit shorter and pointier, and I added belt loops on his underoos. I also removed the white circle from underneath his logo just to harken back a bit more to Atomic Age Batman's simplicity. And there you have it. With a few tweaks, this costume for Cannonball Cooper could be straight out of the 50s. I actually had way more fun designing Redemption's costume for this era than I did the last time. Before I researched this video, I had thought that Wonder Woman was the only female superhero to survive the Atomic Age, which is totally fine because I love Wonder Woman. The problem was, her costume is so skimpy that I didn't really feel very comfortable putting my character in something inspired by it. However, I discovered a superhero that was created during the Atomic Age that featured a much different style of costume than our Amazon princess. Her name is Sun Girl, and she started out headlining her own story in 1948 before becoming the sidekick for the Human Torch. The best part for me is that she is fully clothed and dressed very much like her male counterparts. She is clearly their contemporary. Obviously, I pulled a lot of inspiration from this look for my Atomic Age Redemption costume. This meant I had to almost completely redesign her look from the Golden Age that I designed in the last video. I started by giving her the same kind of spiked boots and gloves as Sun Girl, which actually harkens back to her modern costume's chevron symbols, so I thought that worked perfectly. I also gave her a similar belted tunic over her tights, and I brought back the triangle symbol from the Golden Age era and put it on her chest. I did try to give her a bit of a bullet bra look, which was popular at the time, and some sleek, wavy, shoulder-length hair. With her trademark purple and yellow, this looks like a natural development from the Atomic Age to the modern era. So there we have it. I'll put all our costumes on the screen side by side with the modern ones. These are great examples of what the Atomic Age superhero costumes looked like, although the drawing style is still my own for continuity's sake. I definitely had a lot of fun designing these, and even though I already know a lot about the history of superheroes, I actually learned a few hugely important things, so I'm super glad I was able to do this video. For our next historic superhero costume redesign video, we're going to be looking at the next age in the history of comic books, which is the Silver Age. Ooh, shiny. But in the meantime, just so you guys know, next week we'll probably be back to our more modern, green screen related superhero shenanigans. Whatever shakes out, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up, and subscribe if you want to see more superhero related content every Saturday. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page if you want to support us directly, and head on over to our website at www.fearless9.com to see my OG characters, Cannonball Cooper and Redemption, in action in their book series, The Fearless 9. Thank you so much for watching, Super Friends, and we'll see you next week.